Hello, 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 you fine and beautiful people. Here we are once again. Welcome to the Strange and Deadly Show, brought to you by Gentleman's Grindhouse Records. Yes, it is. You already know this. On this show, we discuss films on the Section 3 list related to the video nasties. Nasty. We pair up our films every fortnight based on a theme. Yes. You can find out more information about all of our podcasts over at gentlemansgrindhouserecords.com and subscribe on iTunes, and also via any other podcatcher you may be using, like Pocket Casts and Overcasts, Shitcasts, whatever you're using. There isn't a podcatcher called Shitcast as far as I'm aware. I was making it up as a joke. I'm just trying to be humorous. I'm rambling. We'll give you that information again and also tell you how you can get your feedback and comments over to us at the end of the show. But don't think about the end of the show right now. This is the very beginning. Now, of course, I'm Chris Clayton. You may know me from my soppy, squeaky little voice that I am but one host on this show. There's another one. Who is it?
It's Tom Elliott.
The Twilight Zone podcast, Tom Elliott. Now, of course, there you know him as a very relaxed, gentlemanly figure, I would say. But on here, he's rude, he's obscene, and he's got a flair for accents. Tom, give us an accent.
I think I'll just stick to my own this week. I don't want to get into that again.
Well, I don't know why you wouldn't, because that was very popular. There were a couple of people who really enjoyed what you did.
It seems so, but I've exhausted most of my repertoire, so unless Sean Connery pops up on the Section 3 list, I think we're done for now.
Can you do a Sean Connery impression? Oh,
yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to do it now, but if he's ever on there, or we ever get to discussing Sean again in the future, I'm going to get you to... I was going to get you to whip it out, but that's a bit rude, isn't it?
It is.
So, Tom, here we are once again. 14th episode, I believe, which is quite astonishing. We're still going. Of course, we missed last week's episode for reasons of, well, basically me not being very well, really. We don't like missing episodes. I certainly don't. Sometimes these things can't be helped, unfortunately. I had a number of things going on in my real life that I had to take care of, but I am here now, as is Tom, and of course, as usual, we have another theme to explore. Tom, tell everybody what that theme be.
Okay, well, this time we are looking at a pair of haunted house movies. To be honest, when we put this list together and we were pairing up these movies, you know, some of them seem to be happy accidents, how well they fit together. These two, I think, I probably saw haunted houses and just threw them together, but they do fit together really well as a nice double bill, I think. And those films are The Evil and The Nesting, both featuring big sort of stately houses in a way. And yeah, a really nice double bill of movies, I think.
Yeah, I was quite surprised, really, at how well these films fit together. It's a very interesting double bill, and of course we're back to horror now. The last two episodes we were away from it a bit, but we're back right where we belong, where we feel the most comfortable, I think. So we're going to talk about The Evil and The Nesting in just a moment, but before we do that, Tom, I haven't spoken to you, or on this show anyway, for the past 2 weeks. What have you been up to, my friend?
Well, I've been a busy man work-wise, and I know we've got some listeners to the Twilight Zone podcast on here, and I have to apologise to them for not getting anything out, but I've literally been working every day for a month without a day off until recently, so, you know, I'll be ticking away on that, but I suppose one of the big things is I've just got a PlayStation 4, so I'll be looking forward to, you know, having a little root through some games, you know, get back into gaming a bit. I do love it, you know, and I know you're a big gamer, so maybe we'll have a bit of co-op on something down the line. You never know.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'd enjoy that. Yeah, I know we've got at least, I'm going to end up upsetting somebody, but I know we've got at least one person who listens to this show who's a diehard Xbox fan who, quite frankly, oh dear, should I say it? Quite frankly, is old enough to know better when it comes to console wars. If you are a grown man worrying about console wars, you need to grow up a bit, my friend. But yes, I do love my PS4 as well, and it's lovely to see you on there, Tom. with your, I'm not going to say what the name is, but with your interesting angsty emo name.
It totally is, isn't it?
That you've got, again, I won't say what it is because I don't want people harassing you on there, but it's interesting. I'll have to ask you about the origin of it at some point.
Well, it was when I used to play Warcraft years ago, and on there you're always like knife bringer or throat strangler, or all these stupid fucking pseudo gothic names, medieval style and stuff. So I chose this name and I used it as my PlayStation name as well, and I've regretted it ever since.
Yeah, but it's funny. One of the things that people who are invested in the sort of Sony ecosystem have wanted is the ability to change your name on there, your PSN ID, and it hasn't been able to happen for sort of complicated reasons. But I didn't want the Gore Boy, which is my, I can give that out because I've given it publicly before. I never wanted the Gore Boy. I wanted to change it when I stopped doing my old Gore Boy radio show, but I've been stuck with it ever since because I'm 32 now. I don't know if I can really be considered a boy anymore. A man, yes, ruggedly man. We should play Diablo 3 sometime, Tom, because I've been playing this shit out of it for the past, I don't know, about a week and a half or so. When I get the time to do it, I've just been going through that on the PlayStation 4. It works brilliantly on a console. They really tuned it and optimized it, because you would think Diablo, I played the hell out of the second one on the PC many years ago when it came out. And they've always been known as a company that sort of focuses on PC. Blizzard, who of course made the World of Warcraft and the Warcraft games, and Hearthstone. But yeah, it's Diablo 3 has taken up a lot of my time, and it's very addictive and it's lots of fun, and I'd love to do some co-op on it at some point. So we need to get you into Diablo 3.
Okay, well, I'm open to that. What about you, mate? What have you been up to apart from that? Anything?
Yeah, apart from that, I sat through the first 2 discs of Leviathan, the Hellraiser documentary. Won't go into huge detail on that because we did it on the last one, but really, really enjoyed it. I thought they were both strong documentaries. A couple of technical niggles here and there, some issues, but really nothing. You can tell that a lot of love, a lot of care and attention went into this.
Yeah.
Really, really good documentary. I've got a bunch of stuff in. I got Slaughter High, Street Trash. I think I might have mentioned this on the last show. Just a bunch of different DVDs in. I got X-Men Days of Future Past. I want to sit down and go through the whole X-Men franchise, even the bad ones, and then watch that. And I just got Zombie Holocaust today from 88 Films, which is a film that we're going to cover on a future episode of Strange and Deadly. So I've got lots of stuff to watch. I just need to prise that bloody PlayStation 4 controller out of my hand. And that is the difficult thing at the moment, but I'm sure it will happen.
There's so much good stuff coming out. It's it's difficult to keep up. Like 88 Films doing great work. Both you and I are excited about the new Hellraiser release from Arrow Video. We spoke about that on Twitter and stuff. It's a good time, not good time for the old wallet though.
No, the Scarlet Box is the name of that, Hellraiser the Scarlet Box, and it's got the first 3 Hellraiser films in it, which I think you and I have always agreed are the best 3.
Yeah, definitely.
And they're also, Arrow Video also re-releasing Deep Red with a brand new 4K transfer. Their original transfer they released, which I've got their copy of it up there, was highly criticised for not being very good. And the Blood and Black Lace disc that I've got, which they released not that long ago, they've got sort of an apology on there for some of the work they did on the old Italian stuff. They are taking care now to try and make sure that they restore these films properly and give the transfers the proper care and attention they deserve. And I guess they're kind of starting that with Deep Red and re-releasing it. I never actually watched the Arrow version because I think it was you and also a bunch of other people told me that it wasn't very good, and I ended up I bought the Arrow one just to have the packaging, the limited edition thing, and then I bought the one from Blue Underground, which is a much better transfer, supposedly. So, Arrow's putting out some really, really cool stuff. 88 Films, some great stuff as well. Some really obscure titles, Zombie Holocaust. I think they're putting out Zombie Flesh Eaters 2.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So, yeah, we're a bit spoilt for choice at the moment, aren't we, Tom?
We are. Their Italian collection is very strong. I'm probably going to get all of those, I think, at some point. But yeah, Arrow's Hellraiser. I kind of wish the 4th one was in there as well, you know what I mean? Because you can, love it or hate it. it still feels like part of the Hellraiser kind of canon proper, whereas some would say from 5 onwards they are a bit disposable, shall we say.
Yeah.
So it's a shame the 4th one isn't in there, but, I'm not going to complain too much. It's nice to have them.
Well, that's part of the cinematic quadrilogy, isn't it? Those were the 4 that went to the cinemas, and then after that they were direct to DVD from there. Yeah, we were talking before we started recording this. It would be really nice to have the whole lot released, even if for some of the sequels that are not very good. Even if it's just a bare bones disc, maybe you stick a trailer on there or something like that. I don't know if you could really expect much more than that, but and a nice enough transfer. They're not going to do a big restoration on these, but just to have something that sort of looks nice, better than what we've got on DVD so far. I mean, I've got a little Blu-ray thing. It's an American Blu-ray that has 4 films on it, I believe, 4 of the sequels. And I think they're sort of 1080i upscales that are supposedly not that great, but they're better than what we've had so far. It'd be nice to have an official thing from Arrow that's just got them all in their big box set.
Yeah.
But we're always wishing for that, aren't we? We want the same with Friday the 13th, and I mean Halloween's had one, but something that's I guess we have a Friday the 13th one, but it would be nice to have something from Arrow with all the special features and documentaries and things that you really want. We're always desiring things like that.
That's right, yeah. I mean, if anyone from Arrow is listening, you never know. That's the thing. We as fans, we've all got those series where you like most of them, but you'll buy the one you don't really like just so you have the set,
Oh, yeah.
We're collectors. We like having these things, and bring out the, Hellraiser 5 to 9, is it? I can't remember, 9 or 10.
Yeah.
Bring them out on, just bring along the existing features if you can get them. If not, I'd just be happy with bare bones releases, because let's face it, it's 1 to 4 that people really like, but just to have a nice definitive set of all of them would be great. Anyway, so I've rambled enough. You know the score, man. You start me on Hellraiser, I will just ramble away. So before we get too deeply into that, let's have a look at our 2 films, and I believe you're going to tell us about The Evil.
I'm going to tell you about The Evil, also known as Evil, The Evil Below, and House of Evil. Ha 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 ha. Scary. It was released in 1978, directed by Gus Triconis, I believe that's how that's pronounced. Written by Galen Thompson, David Sheldon, who's uncredited for his work, you bastards, and Gus Triconis, the director. Here's the synopsis, folks. A sinister presence lingers inside the Vargas mansion. A handyman warily enters the old abandoned property to do some maintenance, but is drawn down to the basement by strange sounds. Inspecting an old oven and finding nothing, he breathes a sigh of relief, but is quickly set aflame and burns to death. It's a warning. CJ and Caroline Arnold, played by Richard Crenna and Joanna Petit, respectively, are a couple seeking new pastures, so they buy the old mansion with a view to cleaning it up. Even from the early showing of the mansion, it's clear to Caroline that something is amiss. She sees a strange white glowing figure appear and then disappear, and the statue seems to move all on its own. CJ, however, isn't convinced and decides to invite people from his psychiatric group over to the house to help spruce the place up and purge it from a mass of cobwebs and dust. In comes Professor Raymond, played by Andrew Prine, and his student lover Laurie, practical joker Pete, and members of CJ's drug rehabilitation program, Felicia and Mary. The group gathers together inside the mansion, discussing their duties, when Mary's dog becomes restless, wandering down to the basement area to investigate something he finds mysterious. He begins digging and soon starts howling, alerting the group, who run to him. Mary eventually finds the dog, but he's uncharacteristically aggressive and attacks her, scratching her arm. More strange events occur, and Caroline continues to see the white figure, even though nobody else seems to. CJ unknowingly opens up a sealed hole in the basement floor, unleashing an evil presence into the house that immediately locks all of the doors and closes the windows, preventing anyone from leaving. With no possible escape, the ghostly presence begins picking off the inhabitants of the cursed mansion one by one. But is there perhaps hope in the white figure? Is he a friend or foe? Well, CJ struggles to believe what's happening, choosing to believe in reason and reality over the supernatural. But as the bodies pile up and the evil presence becomes more sinister, it seems only he and Caroline may be the ones to release its grip on the house and find a way out.
Does anybody have a logical explanation for what's happening?
I think it does have something to do with the storm.
What?
I don't know. Well, it could have, couldn't it? I mean, doors that won't open, glass that doesn't break.
Well, you know that static electricity does incredibly weird things sometimes, Raymond. You know that. Could that have been what made Kaiser go crazy?
No, it's not the storm. It's something else.
Now, how do you know that?
Well, I don't know. But I think the key to all of it is in the diary.
Caroline. What diary?
I found an old diary in the study.
And all the pages were blank except one. That was a riddle.
No, it was a verse. And I think it must be a warning of some kind.
How do you know that?
Well, I've seen flashes of this figure. I have. It's just a shape almost, but I have seen it. I saw it just over there. And he waved me into the study. And there was the diary. And I've seen other things, too.
Are they, visions?
I don't know what they are. They're flashes of something. There must have been some great conflict in this house.
Between what?
Good and evil.
You mean between God and the devil?
I don't know.
Well, you can all sit here and discuss theology if you want. I'm going to try to find a way out of here.
So, Tom, the evil. You're the opposite of the evil. You're a good man. What did you think of this movie?
I remember back in the first episode, we had a little reminisce about the video shop days, and
yeah,
you know, in those days we were a bit less informed about what was coming out, and you would often go to the video shop, look at what was on the shelves, and decide what you were going to rent based on the box.
Yeah,
and I think in a lot of ways this film reminds me of those days, probably more than most that we've watched, because it's the kind of film that I'd pick up and kind of go, oh, it's got Richard Crenna in it, the guy from Rambo. I'll give this a watch, you know, sounds quite fun. And I would probably watch it, be entertained for an hour and a half, not feel that I've wasted me £1.50, entertained by it, take it back and probably forget all about it. I think it's a good, solid, fun little ride for its running length. And that's about it. You know, I don't think it's an amazing film or anything like that. We'll get more into the details of it, but it was a nice little entertaining time, you know. But I'm not going to say it's great, but it was fun, and I did enjoy it. So, you know, they're my general thoughts on it. What about you?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I really did. I thought it was really good. I don't know if it is forgettable. Yeah, I suppose it's sort of fairly milquetoast, I guess you would say. I mean, if you rented this, no, not a classic by any means. You know, perhaps it's understandable based on that why it hasn't been given a proper release on DVD and Blu-ray, even though I think it actually deserves it. I think it holds up reasonably well. Some of the in-camera effects that are in there are a bit ropey now, and of course they look, you know, pretty dated. This film was made in, I guess, 77, released in 78. So some of those effects aren't great, but they also use a lot of practical stuff here. Yeah. And I came away from it, you know, it's slow in the opening. It takes a while to get going because, of course, you're building up the mystery of this mansion. You're bringing people into it. Effectively, you're bringing in quite a few victims to be picked off. It had a very interesting quality to it, good atmosphere. I thought the mansion itself was sort of quite creepy. Cobwebs everywhere. It looked like an old abandoned mansion, which is what you want from this. Very much done, I would say, in the sort of classic haunted house mould. So it fits our theme very, very well indeed. As a general thing, before we sort of dive into the details on it and get into real specifics, I walked away from it, especially as it sort of about halfway through, I thought it really sort of cranked up in terms of energy, and I came away from it really, you know, thinking a lot of it.
It probably sounds like I'm not that hot on it, but I did enjoy it. it is strange that it's not more in the horror fans' consciousness.
Yeah.
Like you say, it hasn't got a decent release that I know of. I mean, the DVD that I bought looked like someone had just slapped an old VHS copy
Yeah.
on a DVD. It looks terrible.
It does.
It was watchable, like, but not great. And where I disagree is it's not necessarily. It is and it isn't in the haunted house modes. For me, a good haunted house movie should really have a sense of impending dread, as the place where you should be the most comfortable in your life gradually turns against you. If you think of films like The Changeling and so on. Whereas this is more like kind of haunted house with a bit of a slasher sensibility.
Yeah.
The good time I had with this reminds me of the good times I have with a slasher. It's more fun than the average haunted house film, I find.
I can see that, actually. Yeah, I can't disagree with that at all. There was that sort of element to it, and it's funny because it was made before Halloween and Friday the 13th, so it was before the slasher film really came into some kind of popularity. I don't think they necessarily meant it to have that sort of feel, because it just wasn't, it wasn't something that was particularly trending at that time, but I feel like it's got elements of it, hasn't it? Certainly sort of prototype elements of the slasher in there. I just think that it for me I think it personally, it's got a lot of classic haunted house elements to it. I did feel that there was an impending dread, especially when these people get locked inside the house and effectively they can't escape, and all they can do is there's some sort of mysterious presence in the house that could be anywhere. It could be right next to them. They would never know until it attacked them. I think there are films that certainly have been done. That in a way, it's strange to say. It's like you mentioned The Changeling, for example. Yeah. The Changeling, I think, is much more of a classic haunted house story, and is a very good movie, but it's not fun. I would say, in the way that this is much more of a serious take on that particular kind of story. I thought this was what it injected is something that I think it needed, which is fun.
I mean, okay, so let's get into some details of it then. I mean, it's strange. In life, it doesn't really interest me, but in film, I do love a good location.
Yeah.
And it was a great house. I'm not sure how much of the interior was set and how much was real house, but it looked good.
Well, I read on IMDb that it apparently was an old health and spa resort that was abandoned, and so they filmed, I'm sure, quite a lot of it in there. I'm sure some of it must have been sets, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. And was it just me? At first, I thought they were getting this house to live in, but it was also to become a sort of drug rehab centre as well, wasn't it, for people to come and stay? Is that right?
I think so. I mean, but I think they already had a drug rehabilitation program. I mean, it's a strange thing because he basically invites people who've been in the program to the house.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a strange thing. I think possibly they were going to live there, and then also they would have, because the guy who was showing them around, he was the estate agent basically. He was mentioning that the building had about 200 rooms in it. So I would imagine that they would be living in sort of the main building, and then there would be a section of it that would be for residents, I suppose.
That's a lot of house for two people, isn't it? 200 rooms. If you wanted to pick it apart, you could kind of say, well, yeah, he's a doctor, but a £200 house takes a lot of renovation, you know what I mean? You would have to have a lot of money, and I don't care what the price is because it's got a bit of a bad reputation, but yeah. We don't care about that. We're just here for the good time, which is what it gives us. But, it's quite a likeable cast as well, I think. Richard Crenna and the actress who plays his wife, I can't remember what her name is. But
Joanna Petit.
They kind of remind me of, old hippies who have kind of got to that stage in life where then they have to become professional kind of thing because, being a hippie doesn't really pay the bills. So, them and their friends kind of reminded me of that. Yeah,
I can see what you mean. I mean, I think Richard Crenna and Joanna Petit in particular, I think they really are the biggest strengths here. I think Richard Crenna is a very confident, assured actor, a brilliant character actor. Of course, you know him from the Rambo movies, but had been in a lot of stuff even before this and after it, of course. I think is really a terrific actor, and I think brings some gravitas to this. And Joanna Petit holds up very respectably as well. Really, I thought the acting in general across the board was quite decent. Really, I didn't see anyone particularly weak. Maybe some of the the girls, Felicia, the girl who plays Felicia, not hugely confident, great deliveries or anything, but across the board, nothing too ropey in the acting department, I would say. And I think it needs somebody to invest in. I think Richard Crenna and Joanna Petit, their characters are CJ and Caroline Arnold, respectively. I think you root for them. I think you root for them and you want them to escape from this hellhole that they found themselves in. Strong characters are something that I always like in a movie, and of course, before I get accused of taking movies too bloody seriously, I do like a character that I can cling to, and I think even though these by no means are classic characters, by no means is this gonna a kind of iconic film in any way, but I do think that Crenna and Petit were pretty strong in this.
Richard Crenna, for me, he's a funny one, really, and no disservice to the man, because I like him a lot, but he's, in this especially, the seriousness of the cast is almost comical, because they're playing it so straight, and of course they're in a house that's killing people, but he sometimes has a sort of Troy McClure kind of quality to him. I find, he's not quite there, but just the sort of po-faced seriousness of it. And in Rambo, he had a bit of humour to him sometimes. He was basically there to tell everyone else how great Rambo is. That's what he does in those films. It's like, I wasn't going to slip into a Richard Crenna impersonation then, but I won't, because I was waiting.
I was waiting. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, and there's nothing particularly jovial in the movie, really, is it? Like, the characters don't... We call the movie fun because it's a fun movie, but the characters themselves are not having a tremendous amount of fun.
No, not at all. It's which is why it borders on comical for me at times. It just reminds me of the deadpanning in, like, Airplane or Police Squad or something, to a degree. It's just below the ridiculous sometimes, the situation that they're in. But they're just so serious about it. But it's part of the charm, it's not a criticism.
Yeah, and I think the fact that the film is well made helps. It's sort of well directed, and it's shot well, and I think that helps. Is that if it was, I think it could very easily cross that line, go into comical territory, if it was a really bad amateurish production. Unfortunately, it wasn't. And we've seen some of those throughout our time on The Strange and Deadly so far, and we're probably going to see a lot more of them. But I thought that this was sort of stitched together reasonably well until a certain point. But I'll tell you about that. We'll talk about that as we get towards the end of this. So we got these guys, they're all in the mansion, and then bad things start to happen. The character of Caroline, of course, played by Joanna Petit, is seeing these sort of white figures, which apparently were in-camera effects. Now, of course, they didn't have in computers at that point, so they had to deal with in-camera effects. That's one part of the film I thought that looked, pretty dated. But you've got to take that for what it is. They do, you can easily tell that it's just a bit of a lame effect. But bad things start to happen, and it does get a bit grisly, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It's and this is sort of ties into the slasher vibe. I find the deaths are quite big. The way people die.
Yeah.
There's a couple of good fire stunts. The first death in the movie is the handyman who goes on fire, and I do love a good fire stunt. And then later on, one of the chaps, I think his name was Peter, is trying to escape, and he climbs down the rope and he goes on fire, which probably my favourite death in the film. Very visually quite good. So the deaths are the strength of it, I think.
Yeah, can't disagree at all. It's funny you say that now, but I sort of got a bit of the slasher vibe. But now that you're actually specifically sort of detailing it, I can see how very much in the slasher the deaths are kind of foreshadowed in some way, and then they're very much focused on, and that's one thing that makes a slasher film perhaps different from other kinds of horror movies. And you can sort of see a bit of that happening here, even though, like I say, the slasher really wasn't a thing at the time that this was made. This was made in 1977. Once you get to Halloween and then Friday the 13th, of course, that's when it really starts to ramp up and it becomes a trend. And then we see a zillion slasher movies made from that point onwards. But I can definitely see that aspect of it. Now, I think some of the characters are a bit shallow. I think that the characters played by Krenner and Petit, are reasonably quite well developed. I think the rest of them are a little bit shallow. I mean, we've got the Professor there, played by Anthony Prine. I think it's Prine, actually. And he's got his student lover, and whose name I can't remember, Laurie, I think it was. And, you know, there's a little bit, he's got a bit of presence in the movie. The rest of them, you got the practical Joker there. Again, that kind of fits in with the slasher theme as well, doesn't it? Because that was something that was, you know, you got Friday the 13th Part 3 with Shelley, character of Shelley, the practical Joker, and you kind of know he's always pulling tricks on people, and something bad's going to happen to him because he's always trying to scare people. In fact, this practical Joker character, whose name I also can't remember, let me see if I've got it here, Pete. The practical Joker, Pete, he pulls a prank on, I think it was Laurie and Felicia. They open up a door and he's hanging there. Do you remember this?
It's something I was going to mention because, I mean, you're right. We've seen similar stuff in slasher movies, especially Friday the 13th Part 3, but I like a practical joke as much as the next guy, but if one of my friends made it appear that they had committed suicide, I would maybe think they're pushing it a bit beyond the realms of good taste, to be honest.
Yeah, because I mean, it was fairly realistic, you know. At least when Shelley was doing it, I mean, it wasn't. You know, he was still trying to, obviously, to fool people, but it wasn't quite as bad as that. And he, of course, has no remorse about it whatsoever. So you know that he's the practical Joker. He's always joking that he's died. So, of course, you know he's going to get it. And that's the same guy who Tom mentioned his favourite death in the film was when he's on the rope. Richard Crenna, CJ is trying to lower him down to the ground because they can't get out of the house. This is the interesting thing about it, is the house, the evil presence in the house locks them in. So it bars all of the windows, the door's shut. They can't seem to get the door open whatsoever. It's like it's been petrified in some way. And they managed to find a door that's open up near the top of the house and they're able to come out onto this sort of, I don't know what you would call that area out there. It's almost like a sort of balcony type of area. And they devised this plan where they're going to tie a rope around a wooden post, and then CJ wants to lower himself down, but Pete says, no, look, I'm quite a bit younger than you, let me do it. You shouldn't have volunteered, Pete, because you met your end not long after, lowers him down, and of course the house doesn't want anybody to leave, so they burn up the rope and he goes bye-bye, unfortunately. Yeah, I will say, actually, funny just saying that nobody ever really has a strong reaction to finding bodies or to a death. Like, you never really see anybody crying, or because you would imagine that's what, if you just saw somebody that you know burning to death, that would probably affect you quite badly emotionally. I would, pray to God that I never ever have to see that. I don't want anybody I know to ever come to harm. But they don't have very strong reactions to any of this that's going on, do they?
I think this film is a perfect illustration of what me and you have said all along. I think if we wanted to pick holes in it, we could. There's a lot of things that we could say, well, that's not very good, or that doesn't really make sense. But because you have such a good time, it doesn't matter. I mean, case in point, I think, is the whole mythology of it. Why is this place how it is? You know, there's this white figure going around who is the ghost of Emilio Vargas. Who he is, I don't know. If they say it at some time, I probably zoned out, because the kind of mythology of it is very sketchy, and we get bits of exposition, we get bits of story through, is it Joanna? Where she sort of gets glimpses of the ghost, and he's trying to tell things to her, and I guess the story is that he has trapped the presence, which we will talk about who he is later on, in the house. And, you know, it's a bit weak. It's a bit poorly kind of conceived, I think. But again, it's a means to an end. You know, it gets the shit going, so I'm fine with it.
Well, what's interesting is that the character of Vargas, who is the white ghostly presence walking around the house, is different to the evil presence that lurks in the house. And of course we're sort of wondering if that is the case throughout the movie, and then as we get towards the end and we see what happens down below the house, we sort of figure out that, okay, Vargas is different to whatever this evil presence is, and we learn more that the diary is there, his diary, and CJ is Richard Crenna's character, by the way. I didn't want to interrupt you in mid-flow, but and Caroline is that's what I've done it loads of times. Caroline is the one that played by Joanna. I can't even get any words out, Tom. But you understand what I mean. Not hugely developed, is it really? But then you could argue that in the Evil Dead films, the Necronomicon is not particularly well developed. I mean, it's got a little bit of backstory in there, of course, when the record is playing and you get to read the book and everything. But I don't feel that it was, and I'm not comparing this to the Evil Dead, which I think is, in a strange way, could almost fit into the haunted house genre. But I still enjoyed this. I mean, talking about the effects in the movie, of course I mentioned the in-camera effects. I thought all the practical stuff with throwing people around the house, and I thought was quite well done.
Definitely, especially where the girl tries to get asleep upstairs and then next minute she's just being dragged around the room. I think someone says in their feedback later that you can see the wires. I couldn't see them on my copy because it was such a shit
rubbish
transfer, so it's probably better that way maybe. But that was good. And there's something later on where someone was dragged around, and again, the rules of what's going on are sketchy. There's a scene later on where everyone's seemingly possessed as well, and it's like, okay, where did that come from? It seems they're kind of making things up as they go along. But again, any criticism I have of it, I can just dismiss. But it was fun, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? There's stupidity in a lot of different movies, and it just depends on whether the stupidity works for you or not. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. You can't, you can't sort of judge everything based on exactly the same criteria. Not everything is the same. It just is. And there is quite a lot of stupidity in this. Why does the stupidity in this work better for me than the stupidity at the end of Happy Birthday to Me? Because it just does. And that's simply what it is.
I've always said I can forgive anything, absolutely anything in a film, if I have a good time with it or I'm interested by it. If I don't have a good time with it or I'm not interested by it, that's when those things start to come to the surface, and you do start to nitpick more because you haven't enjoyed it. So all these things that didn't make sense or could have been better all start to come up, and I think that's the nature of how I come at criticism in a way. If I didn't enjoy it, then I will start to pick holes in something more because I've just sat through this thing and I'm like, well, that bit was shit because you know what I mean? Whereas we're doing this now because, well, we're here to talk about a film, so we will talk about the flaws, but like I say, it doesn't matter in the end because we had a good time with it.
That's what it's all about. We all think differently. We all feel differently about films, and that's okay. It's okay to feel differently to the way that somebody else does. It's okay to not like something that somebody else likes or to like something that somebody else dislikes. It really is okay, folks. And we've always said, maybe we haven't said it enough, but I'll say it here right now. Neither of our opinions on any film that we talk about on these shows is definitive. We're not asking you to feel the same way that we do. If you do, that's great. But if you don't, it doesn't matter. All that matters is whether you enjoyed it or you didn't enjoy it. That's what it's all about, folks. Anyway, ropey stuff. There's some ropey stuff in there. The possession scene that you were talking about, it comes out of the blue. Very strange, not explained at all. I thought that was, kind of a sort of an offshoot idea that they could have cut that scene out and lost nothing.
I think that's the sort of setup, the body of the film, the sort of situation, what happens, they're all together. There's a presence that we don't know. Vargas is this figure that we don't really know whether he's good or bad, and people are dying. Now, at some point, Krenner, I believe, opens the basement, and we get this great scene later on where him and Joanna, or is it Joanna? I keep forgetting the name.
It is, yeah. Well, it's Caroline in the movie.
Oh, Caroline, okay. They're getting blown around, and it's a bit silly, but it's fun. And she falls into the basement. So Richard Krenner, I'm always going to just call him Richard Krenner, goes into the basement after her, where they are confronted by the entity that has been causing all this. Now, it's not just any entity, it's the devil. Mm-hmm. So what did you think of this?
Up until this point, I was really digging the movie a lot. I was like, this has got a good energy to it, and it's got a little bit of that slasher vibe, and everybody in the movie is dead now, apart from CJ and Caroline. And I was really digging it, and I thought it was sort of, silly but grounded in some ways. And then we get to this scene where we get CJ confronting Satan, played by Victor Buono. Now, I sort of looked at this guy's face, and I'm like, I recognise this guy. I don't know where from. And was doing some reading up on him, and not only was he a very well-known, jovial actor, he played King Tut on the 60s Batman TV show, which is, I think, a big part of your childhood probably, and mine.
Yeah.
And if you look on IMDb and everything, it's immediately obvious that most people think, why on earth would you cast this incredibly comedic guy who really is played, is very over the top and silly as Satan in a horror movie? And I thought it was ridiculous. It's really it's the only part really that made me think, oh, you've lost it a bit here. You dropped the ball a bit, because there's this is supposed to be this malevolent evil spirit that's been wandering around the house, killing people, electrocuting them, setting them on fire, making the professor, played by Anthony Preen, practically cut his own hand off. And we find out that it's this silly, sneering, smug git downstairs who's been doing it. Well, I'd had a good chuckle at it, but I do think I think it's the weakest part of the movie, really.
It's interesting. It reminds me of, obviously, some people will know me from the Twilight Zone podcast, and in the Twilight Zone, which is an anthology show, so it's different stories. There's no connective tissue in terms of continuity. The devil appears in several stories, and there are occasions where they present him in this way, as a kind of jovial chap, a portly, quite personable fellow, and often it's to throw you off the scent that it is actually the devil.
Yeah.
So I can kind of see it in that respect, but here he sort of, I don't know, I was okay with it, to be honest, because by this point things had just gotten so ridiculous that it just tips it over the edge into just total ridiculousness.
Sure.
It's an odd choice. It's a very odd choice to have the devil himself in the basement and to show him in this way. I can't deny that, but it's certainly memorable.
I feel like it belonged in a slightly campier movie. But then, having said that, I think maybe you found the film even sillier than I did. I sort of thought in some ways, yes, of course, but in other ways I thought, well, this is grounded in some other ways. And then to have him come in there, I thought was it's memorable. I'll say that much. You won't forget him. He looks a bit like, he should be cooking the Colonel's fried chicken down there. He's dressed all in white with the scraggly white hair. Yeah. It's interesting, but I did think that was the one part where, and look, I'm not looking for the film to be sort of tonally dark all the way through, because the film already was a bit silly and all over the place and ropey in some areas. But I have to say, when he came in, I was like, that's Satan? Not particular, considering this is supposed to be an evil, malevolent force. I walked away feeling a bit disappointed in that particular part of it. But again, not enough for me to walk away thinking, oh, well, that spoilt my enjoyment of it. I still really enjoyed what I was seeing. But yeah, it was, for me personally, it was like, oh dear, you've gone a little bit too campy there. It looks like you've sort of pulled someone in who maybe belonged in a different movie, but that's me.
I think, just to sum up, because we have spoke about the end now. They get away and they drive away, and there's this melodramatic music, just really kicks in with force. And I always think to myself, and I think this about a lot of horror movies, maybe it's just me, but what are they going to say now? They're going to go to the police and say, well, there's a few dead people in their house now. Okay, so what happened? Well, they're probably going to get done for their murders or something. It's going to be like that with every horror movie, to be honest, so I guess it's best not to think about it.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. There was an old slasher movie, I think it was released in 1989, called Intruder, which had Sam Raimi. It was made by and written by one of Sam Raimi's closest friends, and Sam Raimi appears in it in an acting role. And really, really interesting film. Very campy, very silly, but it's set in this supermarket. And well, not a supermarket really. Yeah, I suppose it is like a supermarket sort of store, 7-Eleven kind of thing. And Bruce Campbell is in the movie at the end of it. And basically, there's this slasher that's been killing people inside the store. There are 2 people who managed to get away. They take the slasher down at the end of the movie, and try not to spoil who the identity of the slasher is. 2 cops turn up, and the 2 cops turn up, and they immediately suspect these 2 people, and they arrest them for the murders. And Bruce Campbell is one of the cops. He's only in the movie for, I don't know, maybe a minute, if that. But he's one of the cops. And they arrest these 2 people. And basically, they're the ones who are going to end up going down for all the murders that happened in the store. Because the killer, who's actually secretly still alive, of course, because it's a slasher movie, the killer is dead. So who is left to tell the truth?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so I bring that up because it's an interesting point. And it's funny you mentioned it, because I thought exactly the same thing when I was watching this. Okay, you've gotten away. Everything is great. How do you then explain what happened? And who would ever believe you?
I know. It's I think maybe it's kind of a universal thing in horror, I suppose. Because, I mean, look at the Friday the 13th remake. At the end of that, there's a bunch of people dead. They've killed Jason. And what do? They dump his body in the river. Well, that's more just stupidity, really. Because it's like, you would want to go to the police and say, it was that guy there with the hockey mask. He done it, but he throw him away. But anyway, we're sort of going off on a tangent now. Final thoughts on the movie from you?
I really liked it, Look, it's not a classic or anything. I think it deserves better than what it's got, which is a proper DVD or Blu-ray, really. I mean, I can imagine a company like Arrow putting this out. They're putting out so much other stuff, great thrillers and things like that. I can't see why they would, if you can put out films like Baron, I'm a huge Mario Bava fan. You can put out films like Baron Blood and Kidnapped, Rabid. I don't see any reason why you couldn't put out something like this and sort of restore it a little bit, clean it up a bit. I think it's very decent. I think people who like a good ghost story, haunted house movie, if you like films like The Haunting, which is a classic. I'm not saying this is anywhere near that sort of level of that quality, but I thought it was a respectably decent, fun film, entertaining, and I was a bit worried about it at first. I mean, the copy that we watched, like you were saying, is pretty awful, and I thought, oh dear, I'm going to have to sit through this. Is not going to be very good, is it? But Richard Crenna, he holds it up well, and Joanna Petit, and some nice deaths in there, some grisly stuff, some real silliness. It just entertained me, really, and I walked away thinking, it was a good time. I would probably watch that again if it came out on, on a proper physical release of it. I would definitely give it another go, because I think it's, it's a good film. I definitely one of the better ones I think we've covered in recent times.
Yeah, it's very undemanding on the viewer. You can just sit back and enjoy it. There's a good sense of fun about it, and we're all probably going to come at it from slightly different angles, I think, because it's there to be taken in different ways. But yeah, I really would like to see it get cleaned up, and it does surprise me that it's not a bit more in the public consciousness, because before this, I never really heard of it before.
Oh, you're absolutely right, and I hope that someday it gets the treatment it deserves, really. I think it deserves a bit more respect. It should be known by more people. Anyway, let me tell you about some trivia, some bits that I've got here. Now, according to IMDb, the film was shot in 30 days on a budget of $700,000 by director Gus Triconis, who would go on to direct a number of different TV movies and episodes of TV shows. He definitely worked a lot. I think you can tell that it's sort of handled quite well and it's shot well. You can tell that he was a somewhat experienced guy and would continue to make things. So obviously, wasn't a guy we see with some of these movies that we've covered, that the director will come in and maybe make 2 or 3 things and then bugger off again, because they were never really that good at it. But obviously he was a reasonably talented. This film was made a few years before Richard Crenna attained much more fame, of course, as Colonel Troutman in First Blood, the first in the Rambo series, starring Sylvester Stallone. Crenna would, of course, go on to star in 2 more movies, but sadly... 2 more movies in that series, I should say, but sadly passed away in 2003 from heart troubles at the age of 76. A 4th Rambo film was released in 2008, the only film in the series to date that didn't feature Crenna, and I'm sure it would have if he was still with us. Interesting thing about the Colonel Troutman character, I don't know if you ever read the book First Blood.
I did many years ago.
You did, so you know that the ending of it is very different.
Mm-hmm.
compared to the movie. They wanted to build a franchise, which they did to varying degrees of success, I would say. But I think they're diminishing. Although, actually, having said that, I liked the 2008 film Rambo. It was daft.
Oh, I love it. Beautifully violent.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect way to describe it. Beautifully violent and silly in so many ways, but it's so entertaining and grisly and gory, and a lot of fun, that one. But yeah, at the end of the original book, Troutman shoots Rambo in the back of the head because he knows that he cannot function in society because Rambo basically was crazy. And of course they suffering from tremendous PTSD, but they didn't end up doing that in the movie series, and supposedly there's going to be another Rambo at some point, so that will be interesting. Right, final bit here. Andrew Prine, I'm going to say Prine, is another noted character actor. I recognise his face. I don't know if you did. It appeared in over 180 movies and TV productions over the years. He appeared in a number of westerns with friends like Christopher George and John Wayne, and he seemed to enjoy roles in many different popular genres like horror and science fiction. It's nice sometimes to see these character actors who I'll sort of recognise. I mean, I think I may have seen this guy on an episode of Quincy one time because I was a big fan of Quincy back in the day. He was an old bloke. He got a lot of young women. You've got to admire it. Yeah. So Andrew Prine. You'll probably recognise him in there. It's funny, these some of these character actors, you'll see them and go, I know that guy, and then you have to look them up on eBay and see who they are. Tom, I'm going to defer to you on this one because you somehow managed to score a copy of this. Of course, we've said that it's never really been given a proper treatment, a proper release. How can people see this if they want to?
Well, the DVD is out there. I didn't pay much for it. It was only like £4 or something like that. So it's not a rarity as such. You can get it via the usual channels. I can't remember the company who released it, but it's not anyone of any stature because, like we said, it's a terrible release. It's not widescreen. It looks like it's just been ripped directly from a VHS copy, but unfortunately it's the best we've got at the moment.
Okay, so if you want to see the movie, that's the way you have to do it, I'm afraid. And let's hope, folks, that someday it gets a proper release. I think it deserves it. Now, Tom, sometimes I like to imagine myself nestling away in your arms while you tell me stories. And in particular, tell me about movies that we may or may not have seen. Movies I'd like to hear about. I love to hear your stories, Tom. Your stories the most. I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, Tom, why don't you tell us about a film called The Nesting?
I would love to. Okay. The Nesting, also known as Phobia and Massacre Mansion, released in 1981, directed by Armand Weston, written by Daria Price and Armand Weston. And it goes like this. Agoraphobic writer Lauren Cochran, played by Robin Groves, is living a life in fear. She struggles to even walk outside, shaking and sweating as she darts back home to the safety of her insular existence. Though therapy with Dr. Webb helps, it seems it's not enough to inspire her writing. So Lauren makes the choice to travel out to a quiet part of the country and rent a house there so that she might be more willing to start working again. She travels with her boyfriend Mark and, upon arriving, immediately notices that things aren't quite right with the house. The curtain moves as the two stand outside looking, which only Lauren notices. The house is being rented out by Colonel Lebrun, played by John Carradine, with assistance from his grandson Daniel, played by Michael David Lally, who offers to drive Mark back home once Lauren has settled in. Strange events begin happening to Lauren while in the house, as she hears odd sounds and old music and spots figures that disappear quickly. She has a vivid dream that she remembers in the morning and calls Dr. Webb, convincing him to visit her at the house, which she believes to be haunted. The sound of an old vinyl record being played draws her up to the attic, and she crawls out of the window and onto the rooftop outside, where she begins to panic. Luckily, Dr. Webb turns up and rushes to her aid, but Lauren sees a woman cackling inside the house and screams, scaring the doctor and sending him plummeting to his death, impaled on a rooftop spike. There seems to be much suspicion around two locals in the area, Handyman Frank, played by Bill Rowley, and Abner Wells, played by David Tabor. Frank does repairs at the house and doesn't see eye to eye with a city person like Lauren, and Abner is the crazy guy who's been friends with Frank in the past. Both Lauren and Daniel investigate the history of the house in an effort to work out what's going on and why it might be haunted. An investigation that will eventually provide them with answers neither was expecting.
I have some ham and cheese. Would you like some lunch?
Nope. This gasoline keeps me running.
Frank, you've worked for the Colonel for a long time, haven't you?
Long enough.
Then you would know about this house.
I ain't made no study on it.
I know, but have you seen anybody around here lately on the grounds? Oh, no, thanks.
Like who?
Like a girl with red hair.
Nope. Why do you ask?
Oh, I don't know. I thought I saw her.
Seems like you see a lot of things. You know something? Seems mighty strange for a woman like you to bury yourself up here all alone.
A woman like me?
Don't play dumb with me, lady. You know what I mean.
I'm not sure that I do.
Holier than thou, huh? Invite me in for some coffee, huh? Since when has your kind ever wanted my company for coffee, huh?
Cut it out!
I know what you want, and you're gonna get it. Ah! You little bitch! Now you're really gonna get it.
Okay, Chris, The Nesting, a first view for you, I think. What did you think?
Yeah, absolutely was. Our friend of the show, Gorblimey, he tweeted me and said, I didn't find The Nesting particularly boring. He's wrong. It is. That's my opening sentence on this. I found this to have moments of potential to it, but overall I thought it was a pretty dire experience, really trying to execute a lot of things that didn't work particularly well, and ideas above its station. I think just as a sort of general opinion, because I'm very interested in, I know you'd seen this before, so I'm very interested in hearing what you think on a second viewing of it. But yeah, I've found it to be just bereft really of anything to cling on to, apart from just a couple of little scenes in there. I'm like, oh, if you'd built upon this, it might have been something, but it just is a bit weak and flimsy. And I mean, the movie is about an hour and 45 minutes long. It's too long. I mean, it needed to be probably about as long as The Evil was, which is about an hour and 25 minutes. It needed to be about that, just shy of 90 minutes. Cut it down a bit. And I think you might have had to, tighten it up. It's just too much, and it's splayed all over the place, and none of it particularly works quite well. Compared to The Evil, I think is a pretty far down by comparison. Not one that I had a good time with at all. As a general overview of that, what say you?
When I got a Blu-ray player, I looked at the releases that were out there, and Blue Underground is a favourite of ours. One of those leading companies, and they had tons and tons of DVDs out, and I used to think to myself, God, I wish I'd have been there at the beginning and just bought them all and had this great collection, and even the ones I don't like, it'd be an interesting collection to have. But then they started bringing out Blu-rays, and I bought every one, and I thought, you know what, even the ones that I don't like, I'll have this great collection of films, and they'll even if they're not good, they'll be challenging and, interesting. So I bought them. And then The Nesting came along, one of their releases, and it was, a lot of people were speaking about it like it was a bit of a forgotten gem, one that had sort of slipped through the cracks. So I thought, great. And I bought the Blue Underground Blu-ray. And that was the last time that I bought a Blue Underground Blu-ray blind that I didn't know. And nothing against the release. They did a great job, as they always do. But the film, I just thought, you know what? What's the point in spending money on that? Because I'm never going to watch it again.
Yeah.
Although I did for this show. I would say for, maybe the first third, it's fine. it has quite a good atmosphere to it. You know, there's a few things that go on that are quite unsettling, and it's set up like it's going to actually be quite good, but then it just loses it, and I just ended up being very bored by it. We'll go into details later, but it's terrible to say, but I can't even remember how it ended because I was just so disinterested in it. Did she die? I can't remember.
No, she didn't die at the end, actually. She manages to make it out of the house. It's funny you say that because I only watched it yesterday and I've forgotten so much of it. It's very forgettable. I will say that I disagree with you on one thing. I actually think the film perks up a bit as it goes on. I found the beginning of it quite difficult to get into. I just found it very slow building up and getting to the house, and also I have to say I don't particularly like Robin Groves as the lead character. I thought the character of, I can't even remember what her name is now. What was her name? Lauren. I found Lauren to be screechy and going into histrionics all the time, and I just didn't care for the character at all, which takes me out of it to some degree. But I do think that aside from the individual scenes, I thought when you started to get into some of the backstory of exactly what was happening to the house, I thought it perked up a bit more. So I'm a little bit of the opposite to you. I still think the ending of it and everything is daft, as daft as one can imagine. But I did think that I thought it sort of loosened up a bit. Having said that, I wanted it to be tighter, so what am I talking about? But I thought it was more interesting as it went on, a little bit more interesting as it went on. The first third of it, I was quite bored.
Well, the thing for me is it starts out as quite a good haunted house film, I think, because it does have a bit of a sense of dread, good location. The house is very a nice house, and a good haunted house movie needs a good house, and I think in that regard it's fine. But it just, as it went on, things just didn't really make much sense to me. I mean, she is a writer and she goes out there to write, but strange things start to happen in the house. She starts to see things, strange dreams and so on. Fine, okay. But then later on, Frank turns on her. Frank is the handyman.
Mm-hmm.
And he, if I remember rightly, he ends up trying to rape her.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure whether this was the house sort of making him do bad things, or whether that was just Frank. And then later on, you put it in the synopsis as well, this local guy who goes nuts and comes after it, and it's like, they're not even in the house. Why is he doing that? You know what I mean? I can't understand why this is a thing, and it's quite a long sequence, isn't it?
Yeah.
It just seems a bit pointless. All it serves is to put her in peril for a while.
Yeah.
And it does that, fine, but what does this link to anything? I just didn't get it.
Well, I think there is an explanation for that, in that she's sort of uncovering little fragments of information about what might have happened in the house, and she happens to bring that up in front of Frank and then separately in front of Abner as well. And I think, for example, Abner turns on her when she mentions, I think it's certain initials, and so they both become aware that she knows what they did in the house, because the very opening scene is these three boys going into the house, and you hear a lot of gunfire. Something's happening there. You don't get an explanation for what's actually happened at that point. And then later on in the film, we'll talk about the ending in a little while, but you get a full scene that shows you what actually happened in the house, and Frank and Abner are very much a part of that. So I think the reason they turned on her is because she's finally uncovered this information that would implicate them in what actually happened there, and that's why they're trying to kill them. Now, having said that, they do basically do it as a way to turn both of them into a villain, because there's nothing in the house that's particularly deadly. This is the thing of it, compared to the evil where, the spirits inside the house are trying to kill these people. Here, it's more that they're just sort of making a bit of noise, and they're not actively trying to kill Lauren. So it does feel a bit like, this is what they have to do to put her in peril, like you say. There's a big long chase sequence with Abner where he's chasing her down. I thought his acting was diabolically bad. Just really sort of, how do I be a psycho? I know, I'll just run around gurning and laughing.
Right.
And I can tell you could disagree with me because you went right in a very serious manner. But
No, I don't disagree with you at all. You're absolutely right. I will say though that went completely over my head. All that stuff with, of course, it makes sense now. Now you've just explained it, but I think it was just part of my total disinterest in the film.
Yeah.
That I've just totally missed it. You know.
Well, look, that's understandable. I mean, the film nearly... I tweeted and I was being serious about it. It nearly put me to sleep at one point. And I'd had a good full night of sleep beforehand. And I nearly nodded off, I don't know, maybe a third of the way through it. And then it, because she's in peril to some degree with these two, with Abner and Frank turning on her, it perks it up a bit because there's actually something happening, because for the most part they're just sort of these little events that happen, and then she's off doing something, and then this guy Daniel comes in, and then he's there and he's doing some investigation. Never really plays a tremendously big part in it, but I suppose we're meant to believe that he's doing these investigations. And so when those bits happened, it did... it got me going a little bit. And it's interesting what happens to Frank, because like I said, there are a couple of little scenes in it, little bits, where you think, oh, okay, this is going down the grisly territory, and this is sort of a bit, like there's the scene, for example, with poor Dr. Webb, who turns up at the house, she insists, which I thought is one of the things I didn't like about her, where he's like, look, I've got patience, I've got things I've got to do here, and she's pretty much like, look, I'm paying you a lot of money, so you better get your ass down here as soon as possible. It's like, well, fuck off. Who the hell are you to tell him? He's a very busy man. And anyway, I feel sorry for the poor guy, because he ends up driving out there anyway to see her. She's on top of a rooftop screaming, you daft wench. And she's up there, and he runs up there to help her get down from the web, and he falls down and gets impaled through his eye on a bloody spike. And you think, I felt that's the character I felt the most sympathy for in the whole thing. I was, apart from some of what goes on in the house in a flashback scene, I thought, poor Dr. Webb, coming there to help you, you moany git, and this is what's happened. Sorry, Tom, I'm very angry about this whole thing.
It's fine, mate. You know what? Sorry, I'm lapsing into that thing that I do when I'm completely bored by a film when I can't even be asked talking about it. So apologies to the listeners. I'll try and get myself back on track, but I can't remember any of it. It just has evaporated from my head. So you can ramble away on this one. I really don't mind.
All right, not really the film I particularly wanted to ramble on. But so let's say you've got these chase sequences that happen. I think one of the better scenes in the movie is when Frankie's been running away. He's been attacked by the spirits in the house and sort of thrown around and picked up, and he's hovering there in the air, and he ends up running away. Like I say, he tried to rape Lauren, and then he's running away saying it was Abner who did it or something like that. And he ends up running into a lake, and he runs in there. He's sort of washing his face, trying to calm down, and these hands come up from the lake and pull him down under the water, and obviously he drowns under there. I thought that was quite a cool effect, actually. I thought if there was a little bit more of that, it reminded me a little bit. Now you're gonna think I'm mental when I say this. The vibe of it, now and again, reminded me a little bit of The Beyond, the Lucio Fulci film. Now, it's nowhere near as good as the Lucio Fulci film because there's a lot happening in that, and I feel like that's got a tremendous atmosphere and vibe to it, which this doesn't have. But that sort of moment reminds me of something that would be in a film like that.
No, I can see that. I don't disagree.
Yeah, so it was. I thought that was a good scene, and Abner getting the what was it now? I can't remember. It was some sort of farming implement, wasn't it?
Yeah, like a scythe kind of thing.
Yeah, like a scythe sort of thing, and she whacks it against his face, and a bit of a slashery sort of death, I thought. So, you've got a couple of bits like that. There's a strange love triangle in the movie that I wanted to... which I don't understand why they bothered, because it doesn't go anywhere. Which is that you've got this character of Mark, who is her boyfriend, who is irritating, because he's that type of guy... It reminds me of the film... this type of character, anyway, reminds me of the film Paranormal Activity, the first one, where you've got the girl there who's experiencing these horrible events, and her boyfriend just does nothing throughout the movie except go, "You're crazy, ha 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 ha," and making her shut up, you fool. And I couldn't stand that character when I watched that movie. And he's a similar sort of character here, where it's like, well, you must be seeing things, you know. Why doesn't anyone ever believe their partner until it's too late? So you've got Mark, and then he has to go back to, I don't know, whatever city that they live in. And Daniel comes onto the scene. Now, Daniel is the grandson. Daniel's son, you could say. Daniel is the grandson, played by Michael David Lally, of Colonel LeBrun, played by John Carradine. Now, John Carradine is a legendary actor, legendary character actor. Has appeared in so many different things. We'll tell you a little bit more about him later, but you probably already know, and you know about his sons. But you got Daniel coming in, and there's this strange thing where at some point he's sort of helping. He believes her that there's something strange happening in the house, and he's sort of hanging around with her and supporting her because of these horrible things that she's seen. And she has a dream that she's having sex with him. And then he turns up at the door and offers her a flower that's exactly the same one that she saw in her dream moments before. And she gives him a big kiss. And then he says to her, you know, look, if I bring you another flower, can I have another kiss? And it's like, well, what's going on? Are you in love with Daniel now? But it's never resolved at all. Like, it's at the end of the movie, you know, we already said that she escaped from the house anyway, but at the end of the movie, Daniel turns up and she hugs him, and then Mark turns up a moment after because he's driving back up there, and then she hugs him, and it's like, what was the point of that? Is there a love triangle here? Are you going to date them both?
I don't know. So what happens at the end again? She escapes, does
Tom. she escapes. Let's tell everybody. Let me tell you as well, Tom.
Please.
What this is all about. So basically, the reason the house is haunted is because it used to be a house of ill repute, Tom. There were prostitutes in there. They were doing things that you wouldn't believe. Hand jobs, blow jobs, the works, Tom. Everything was going on in that house. And what was happening was the colonel's son had a child with one of the prostitutes. The colonel, played by John Carradine. And you pronounced it Carradine earlier. It's Carradine. I'm only saying that in a smug way because I had to look it up before we did the notes because I wasn't sure either. And so, yeah, Colonel's son Daniel is supposed to be the grandson, but in actual fact, he's an illegitimate child of somebody else. Who gives a shit? The son has a baby with one of the prostitutes who lives in the house. There are 3 boys who go into the house, commanded basically by the colonel, who says, look, I do not want my son to marry a prostitute, a woman of the night, as it were. And so that he hires these 3 guys to go in and take the baby away from them. What ends up happening is they refuse. His son shoots at the boys, and they end up killing everybody in the house, everybody, apart from the baby. The baby ends up being sent away for adoption. It turns out that the baby grows up to be Lauren, who is our main character, the writer, and she's come into the house, and that's why they have this strange connection with Lauren when she enters the house, because what they wanted is revenge against these boys, Abner and Frank. They were 2 of the boys. I don't know who the 3rd boy is, to be honest with you. They were 2 of the boys who entered the house many, many, many years ago and killed everybody inside, and they want revenge against them.
Right.
Eventually, they end up, the spirits are the ones who have actually helped Lauren dispatch these guys. So at the very end of the movie, they say, okay, Lauren, it's done now. We've taken our revenge. You are free to leave and go in peace and live out the rest of your life. Then she doesn't do that. She walks into a room and then cries a bit, and then the room gets set on fire. But actually, it wasn't set on fire. It was all a vision. And then she runs out of the house. The 2 blokes turn up. After that, that's the end of it. End credits come up, and that's it. And that's
Wow.
that took a lot. That took a lot of processing power in the old brain to be able to squeeze that out, Tom. That's what happened. Look, it's John Carradine's in this. It's a thankless role. He's only in it for maybe 5 minutes total. Maybe not even that, actually. It might be 2 or 3 minutes. Thankless role for him. Really, nothing that particularly stands out. Really found the lead character quite annoying. very forgetful story, and despite what Gorblimey said about him not finding it boring, I did, and so did you, Tom, because you can't even be bothered talking about it anymore.
To be honest, most of what you said was like a revelation to me. I was like, wow, really? That happened? I take my hat off to you. Well done for paying attention. I'm sorry, listeners, but sometimes with these films, I just sit there and think, for God's sake, and this just bored the crap out of me.
Yeah.
And it just evaporated from my brain. So that's not a great review, and I apologise, but in itself, it's a review. So there you go.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to say this. It's not often I do this, because I always like to stand by my opinion, but I'm going to say this. On the last episode, I tore GBH apart. And I don't think it's a good movie at all. I still don't. But I'll say this much for it. It wasn't boring like this. And I said that was one of the worst movies that we've covered so far. I take that back. I take it back. I don't like GBH. Again, don't think it's a good movie. And I don't really want to see it again. But it was miles more entertaining than this was. And this is one of the worst that we've covered so far. It is just bereft of really anything, like we say, apart from maybe a couple of tiny bits, which I'm saying that Tom's forgotten them. There's just a couple of bits in there that it's like, yeah, okay, that's all right. But I mean, I'm sort of struggling. It's a revelation to me that I can even remember all of the details that I just said. So yeah, I didn't like this one at all. And I almost bought it, actually, because I was trying to, I was like, oh, maybe I should just buy it because it's a Blue Underground release. I'm sure it'll be good. And Tom told me, no, look, you don't want to do that, because I had it and I ended up selling it. And I think that's a sign, isn't it, really, that it ain't a good thing. Tom, you talk for a bit. Because it's a show with two people on it, and why don't you sum up your feelings on the whole affair?
It's a strange one, because in a lot of ways, I don't think it's a particularly badly made movie. It looks good.
Yeah.
It's got that 70s vibe about it, which we all love. It's fine in a lot of ways. It's just, when a film, you're kind of invested, but the longer it goes on, the less and less invested in it you are. That was this. I just completely lost interest in it. I'm sorry. I'm even looking out the window now. Just right. So we better wrap this up.
Well, don't lose interest in the show, Tom. Blame it on the film, not the show. Yeah. Let me read you some trivia. You'll want some trivia on this, right? Tom, you want some trivia, don't you?
Oh, I'd love some.
Right. Well, let's do it. The film features two legendary film performers in John Carradine and Gloria Grahame. Now, Carradine is a noted and well-respected character actor, has 348 credits to his name on IMDb. I imagine this wasn't one of the finest ones. He appeared in so many different kinds of films, many of which were rooted in the horror genre. Carradine had 5 sons: Bruce, Christopher, David, Keith and Robert, 4 of whom would go on to have strong acting careers of their own. Particularly David, of course, who became a household name thanks to his role on the highly popular TV series Kung Fu, and latterly a role as the titular villain in Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill. John Carradine passed away in 1988 at the age of 82. Where we have Gloria Grahame, who I didn't really know much about, to be honest, was a respected actress. Just to tell you, she is the sort of main woman in the film who plays Florinda. Is sort of one of the main prostitutes in there, or woman of it. Is it not PC to say prostitutes?
I can't say I really know, to be honest.
I want to give them their proper due.
Many, escort, maybe.
Yeah, maybe escort. So Gloria Grahame was a respected actress in the film noir genre throughout the 40s and 50s, and appeared in films, believe it or not, like It's a Wonderful Life, The Big Heat, and Oklahoma. She also did much stage work and appeared in TV shows like The Outer Limits and The Fugitive. The Nesting was to be Grahame's final film appearance, as she sadly passed away at the age of 57 from stomach cancer in 1981, the year the movie was released. Not really the one you want to be your last film, is it? A bit like Street Fighter for, what's the name of the actor now? He was a great actor.
Yeah, the guy from the Addams Family.
Yeah, well, I can't quite remember his name at the moment, but a fantastic actor. His final film credit, Street Fighter. Not good. With Jean-Claude Van Damme. Yes, this was director Armand Weston's only legit film. The rest of his filmography is filled out with pornography, and he ended his directorial career with one final adult film entitled Blue Voodoo in 1981. Interesting thing, just to go back to The Evil for one moment, Gus Triconis actually directed a film, I think it was in about 1974, 1975, called Supercock.
Ah.
So, I'd quite like to see that. It's not an adult film, apparently. It's a comedy. But, yeah. Old Supercock. So, the nesting. Obviously, after our glowing review of it, you want a copy for yourself. Of course, who would blame you? It's easily obtainable on Blu-ray and DVD from Blue Underground, of course. UK buyers will need to import the release, but it's region-free. I think all of Blue Underground's Blu-rays are region-free on both formats. So you can stick that on your Blu-ray player and enjoy it like we did.
Or not.
Or not, as the case may be. Now, Tom, it's time to do some feedback.
Okay, well, it's time again to say aloha to Rob Maloha. And, sorry, I just amused myself.
It's a great joke, Tom, and quite frankly, we should do it every time he writes in.
Well, I think we are. Well, he's picked up on it anyway, because he says, aloha, Chris and Tom. Alistair McGowan and Rory Bremner better watch out. The calibre of your impersonations and accents last week was second to none. Well, thank you. The thing about them is, though, none of them sounded like who they were supposed to be, did they? It was just
not
like
at all. Not at
silly
all.
voices. Almost as good as Cliff Twemlow's performance in GBH. Almost. It was a great episode, though, and very funny. A bit of disagreement goes a long way.
Don't you insult Clef Trimlow in my presence, Rob Maloha, you Hawaiian fool.
Unfortunately, I've not managed to squeeze the nesting in.
Oh, no.
Well, it's not arrived yet, but it is on the way, so I'll let you know what I thought next time. I did watch The Evil, though, and thoroughly enjoyed it. The cast are great, particularly Richard Crenna as CJ, and the group dynamic works really well. The haunted house setup is very effective too, helped along by some great practical effects and a few shocks along the way. I particularly enjoyed the scene where Lynn Moody was being pulled around by the invisible ghost, even though the wires jerking her were slightly less invisible. Director Gus Triconis managed to create quite a spooky and claustrophobic atmosphere, but this was slightly ruined as the ghost became more visible during the film. It even seems to wave them off through the window at the end. He's right, it did. I really don't know what to make of the finale, though. Part of me liked it, and part of me just thinks why. I enjoyed Victor Buono's cameo as the devil. He chewed the sparse scenery very well, but should it have been in this film? I was discussing the ending with Dr. X, Cinema Psychosis, on Twitter, and he eloquently put it that the essence of B-movie entertainment is to entertain. Everything is subservient to that cause, or it just gets in the way. Well, the finale was certainly entertaining, and it made the film stick in my mind, so maybe it was a good thing. Of course, there's only one way that ending could have been improved. Cliff Twemlow could have played the devil. It would have been a classic then, and no mistake. He's right there, to be honest. And if Cliff Twemlow would have been in The Nesting, that would have been a totally different review.
Absolutely. He would have stuck it in, Lauren, before you can blink your eyes. And I'll tell you what, he would have put the charm on old Crenna.
Absolutely.
He would have cranked old Crenna off.
Right. In the absence of The Nesting, I'm off to watch the new Blu-ray of Joe D'Amato's... Oh, don't make me say this.
Anthropophagus.
There you go. I've never seen it before, so it should be an experience. Cheers, Rob. At Rob's Lib on Twitter. Well, thank you, Rob. Yeah, we had a good time with it. At that end, and it seems to be the thing a lot of people talk about, doesn't it? It's not really a film that's out in the consciousness, but if you look for it on the internet, people have talked about it, obviously, on things like IMDb and stuff. So, it's there, and that seems to be a thing that people tend to feel shifts the tone somewhat. It's like a different ending bolted onto a different movie, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But, it works for some people, not for others.
Okay, so we've got another email from Rob Maloha. He can't keep away from us. But it's because, of course, we had that little delay in episodes, and that's why he was able to write in. Because he received the nesting. You actually spent money on it, Rob. You poor, sad fool. He says, aloha again. See, he has, hasn't he? He's caught onto it now.
Yep.
Aloha, maloha. Due to your slight delay in recording, hope you're feeling human again, Chris. Never feeling human. I've managed to go on holiday. Come back and watch the nesting. Was it worth the wait? Not really. It wasn't a terrible film, but not nearly as good as The Evil. It was too long and seemed to lose its way in the second half, particularly when Frank and Abner decide to attack Lauren. Then there's the overacting, which every member of the supporting cast are guilty of. It's laughable at times, particularly with the aforementioned surly drunk Frank and super surly drunk Abner hillbilly caricatures. Despite this, Robin Groves holds her own as Lauren. I didn't think so. Although she touches on the melodramatics with some of her hysterics, and it's always nice to see John Carradine playing another grumpy old man. My biggest disappointment was that Lauren's maybe boyfriend Mark didn't meet a grisly end. He was so annoying in the opening scenes, and I was waiting through the whole film for him to come back to the house and get killed. The only consolation was that he didn't really come back at all. It's all pretty tame considering this is director Armand Weston's only non-porn offering, and like The Evil, I really can't understand how it got anywhere near a Video Nasties list. Cheers, Rob, at Rob's Lib. So thank you very much, Rob. Yeah, hard to disagree with some of that. I mean, like I said, I thought the second half of it was a little bit better just because it sort of perked up, really. But yeah, in general, not a great one. I would imagine, Rob, you're going to stick that one up on eBay pretty soon, just like Tom did, because it doesn't bear repeat viewings, really, does it?
Rob mentioned him earlier on, Dr. X, a chap on Twitter who's caught up with us lately, and he sent us an email, which is good, so thank you, Dr. X. He says, Dear Strange and Dear Deadly.
Which one do you want to be?
I'll be Deadly.
Alright, I'll be Strange.
Hello, fellas. I found your podcast only a couple of weeks ago, and I'm still catching up on earlier episodes. Loving it so far. The Sections 3 list is a subject worthy of investigation, and you're doing a grand job. Thank you. For the sake of time, I'll skip the films you've covered so far. Instead, I offer my own quick reviews of the two movies featured in this upcoming episode. The Evil, Victor Buono as Satan in the basement. No, not a randomly generated sentence, but an honest and accurate description of the baffling climax to this cheap and cheerful haunted house flick. Richard Crenna stars as a psychology professor who, with the help of his loyal students, is setting up his new clinic in an abandoned mansion house. And guess what? The devil himself lives in the basement. What I remember of this movie, aside from the astonishingly camp finale, are the death scenes as one by one the students are dispatched by the forces of evil. There's something hapless about those scenes that approaches slapstick. For example, this movie taught me not to descend a rope during a lightning storm, especially when you suffer from restless leg syndrome and you happen to share the premises with Beelzebub himself. And you're an idiot who's clearly never been near a rope in your life.
Good point.
Yeah, Crenna is as hammy as ever, and Andrew Prime does the bug-eyed thing as only he can, while Joanna Petit and Cassie Yates round out the cast of cult movie familiars. The acting in this movie is sometimes cheesy, other times earnest, often both. Yeah, I think he's kind of getting onto the same vibe I kind of caught of it. You know, it's approaching, you know, Troy McClure levels at times for me, but it's no bad thing.
Yep.
Oh, and don't forget the electric saw through the hand scene. If memory serves, we only get the briefest glimpse of the hand being sliced. It's a shame. I remember it as a decent practical effect. What I do remember, what everyone remembers about this movie, is the finale. For fans of cheesy offbeat endings, The Evil is a rare treat. As for the rest, it's an affable affair that entertains, sometimes despite itself. A mild recommend for fans of the era. Okay, The Nesting. Is this a sleazy exploitation movie or a creepy haunted house movie? The answer, sadly, it's neither of those things. You've no doubt covered the plot in detail. Well, Chris did. I fucking didn't. So I won't try and wade through it again. I will say this. This movie borrows or steals from classic horror films of the era, but fails to make much of those parts. Whether the fault is the poor execution, lack of belief in their own material, or just a creative deficit, who knows? One thing I do know is, if you're going to steal from The Shining, you better have the chops for it. The Nesting doesn't. Shameless stealing isn't necessarily a bad thing. Take, for example, that great 1979 Italian exploitation classic, Stridulum, aka The Visitor. That film is a remix tape of 60s and 70s horror and sci-fi hits. Every 5 minutes we're in a different film. The Omen, Rosemary's Baby, Close Encounters, the hits just keep coming. It's packed to the brim with stars old and new, and the whole thing is blithering nonsense from beginning to end. It's wonderful. I ask you, what other film rips off so many other movies and still finds room to squeeze in a blonde-wigged Franco Nero as a reluctant Christ figure and Sam Peckinpah as a depressed GP? If you're heading down that road, put the pedal to the metal, commit to your trash aesthetic and go wild. You may as well. No one's going to thank you for being mediocre. Some films achieve their ambitions, others fail, but find entertainment in their failure. The biggest problem I have with this film is that it falls into neither category. The Nesting just doesn't have the guts to be a trash classic or the skill to be a horror classic. Frankly, it's bland soup. Anyway, that's my tuppence on The Evil and The Nesting. I look forward to your official reviews of these two. For the future, I await with bated breath your coverage of Dawn of the Mummy, Nightmare City and Werewolf Woman. 3 of my favourite trash classics that happen to be on the Section 3 list. Till then, keep up the good work. Be well and lots of love. Dr. X, aka Andy. Thanks, Doc. Good. I think we're sort of on the same page as Dr. X there, to varying degrees. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Doctor. It's really good to hear from you. You sent a nice long email in. Obviously very passionate about these kinds of movies, and we are too, by the way. But I want to know, where did he get the name Dr. X from? Now, is it a... Now, I'm only saying this because I'm a big metalhead. Is it a reference from to Operation Mindcrime, the Queensryche album? I hope it is. But I know Tom's sitting there blank, like, what the fuck are you talking about? But thank you very much, Doctor. Please continue to write in. We'd love to hear from you. We really enjoy your opinions. And that was Dr. X. Andy Fitzpatrick made a lot of good points there, I thought. Now, I've got an email from our old mate, Carl Bennett. Now, I feel like a complete tit. I feel that way most days, Tom. But in particular... because we recorded the last episode and I completely forgot to thank him for something. Carl Bennett recently, where he's one of our listeners, he writes to me on Twitter all the time. He went to America and he was going to go there and pick up a load of horror stuff, different releases and things like that. Ended up finding hardly anything. But he, asked me before he went out, would you like me to get you anything? And of course I was like, well, thank you very much. That would be very nice, as long as you... please keep the money for your actual holiday, but if you manage to find anything you can spare the cash for it, I'd love it, and then I'll pay you back for it. He ended up sending me a steelbook, because he knows I love steelbooks, Tom, and you know it too. He ended up sending me a steelbook of Spaceballs, which is one of my favourite comedies of all time, and I said, look, how much do I owe you for this? He said, look, nothing at all, for all the free entertainment you've given me, which is just wonderful. And I just wanted to really, really thank him for that on the podcast. And I should have done it on the last episode, but for some reason we were getting fired up and getting into the episode, and I forgot to mention it, and it had arrived that morning. So I just wanted to mention it here and say again, thank you very much, Carl. That really is just a tremendous gift. Just so generous of you, and I treasure it very much. So thank you very much, Carl, for the Spaceballs Blu-ray steelbook. It's a wonderful thing. Now let me read the email. He says, hey guys, I don't have feedback on this week's movies as I haven't had a chance to track them down, but what I do have is a question for you both. What has been your least favourite film reviewed so far, and what film remaining are you most looking forward to reviewing? Every show has been thoroughly entertaining, but I have to say last week's was amazing. I think I speak for every listener when I ask you, please try to segue some accents into every show going forward. Alright, we will in a minute. Thanks for the time that you both put into the podcast and entertaining us all. It's greatly appreciated, Carl. Thank you very much, Carl. Accents, right. Now, I'm going to ask you this question. Of course, he asked it here. Tom, what has been your favourite or least favourite film reviewed so far? And what film remaining are you most looking forward to reviewing?
Look what you done, Carl. Jesus,
What?
Sometimes you got to be careful what you ask for. All right, let's have a look down this list. It's
Tom,
a tough
you've
one.
got to do an accent, Tom.
Well, it's mild Scouse. So, We did have a conversation once where we, like when we've done the Section 3 list, we might have a bit of a roundup episode, mightn't we, where we kind of say, you know, what's our favourites, what are our least favourites, and kind of open it up to the audience. So, you know, we might do that at the end. As of this point, it's a tough one. I don't want to say stuff like The Thing because it's The Thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if we discount, like, the obvious, The Thing, as for favourite in terms of a film that I have found that I believe will now become part of my sort of regular film viewing, Christmas Evil comes high on the list for me. Bottom, it's either gonna be Cannibals or Zombie Oasis or Erotic Rites of Frankenstein. How about you, Chris?
Why, yes, my good man. Thank you very much for asking the question. I'm doing another accent. Why, I have to say, dear Thomas Elliot, that my favourite film that we've covered so far... This is rubbish, isn't it? My favourite film that we've covered so far is probably Christmas Evil. Now, that is, of course, we're excluding... I feel like we need to exclude a film like Scanners, because I was a big fan of Scanners even before we covered it, of course. And The Thing, because it's The Thing. I mean, if you're talking about what the best film that we've covered so far, it's The Thing. I mean, it just is, you know. But I would say... so far, for just from all the films that and to be honest, I mean, I'd seen Christmas Evil before we covered it, Tom hadn't, but I think Christmas Evil was right at the top of the list, because it sort of fits into all the things that we like. You know, when we used to have our conversations years and years ago, just chatting about films that we'd seen recently, and the things that Tom and I sort of bonded over was that kind of films like Maniac, Christmas Evil. So I think that's at the top of the list. I have to say that I think, you know, Massacre Mafia Style was a discovery, just for, you know, not a great film by any means, but I think that was that made me want to seek out, you know, to buy that film and the other one that I can't remember the name of that he did. I can't remember his name either, Tom. It's been a long show.
Duke Mitchell. Gone with the Pope, I think.
Yeah, and Gone with the Pope. Yeah, so that's maybe want to check that out. I actually think one of the best films we've covered so far is The Evil. On this show, like, again, not a great film by any means, but I think it's certainly one of the better quality ones. Yeah, so I feel like we're both in agreement that Christmas Evil is probably the best one.
And have you said your least favourite?
No, I didn't actually. Yeah, my least favourite. I mean, there's been a couple of GBH, obviously. No, I mean, I'm kind of taking GBH back a bit, even though I still don't really like it. But I would say. It's got to be between, Cannibals is really bad. Zombie Oasis is just boring. Yeah. What was there was another movie, actually. I'm trying to remember what it was now. It was like a sort of documentary Mondo movie. What was that?
God, yeah. Brutes and Savages.
Yeah, that was...
that one as well.
That was rubbish, wasn't it? Yeah, so I would say between those three, Brutes and Savages, Cannibals, and... and Zombie Oasis. Or Oasis of the Zombies, yeah. They're bad movies.
Yeah, I'm going to say Brutes and Savages now you reminded me. I would never want to sit through that again.
Yeah, and The Nesting is not too far off, I would say.
All right, thanks for that, Carl. It's, you know, and everyone out there, start keeping tabs, and maybe we'll have that listener feedback episode at the end of that list.
Yeah.
So, we've got an audio clip from our friend Gore Blimey, so it's going to be good to put a voice to the guy who's been sending us emails all this time. So, take it away, Gore.
Hi guys, Gore Blimey here. That's Gore Blimey, not Gore Boy, on Twitter as @DoubleAgent73. First off, I've had a look at the list of upcoming films, and it's great to see we've got some classic stuff coming up on the podcast in the next couple of weeks. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who's getting excited about Nightmare City and Zombie Holocaust for a start. No, really, I can't wait. In the meantime, I couldn't get hold of The Evil, but I did have a look at The Nesting, so here are my notes that I jotted down. So we've got an agoraphobic woman who describes herself as an uptight, neurotic, creative, brilliant nutjob who rents a massive 5-story domed mansion so that she can inhabit one room. She's got a boring boyfriend called Mark and some other boring bloke called Daniel, who I had a bit of a job to tell apart, to be honest. And there's an old colonel who wins the award for most bizarre line of the film when he says, "Put some spunk back into him," which sounds like it's come from a very different kind of film altogether. And then there's Dr. Webb, good old Dr. Webb, a psychologist so unsympathetic when he sees a woman standing precariously on a rooftop shouting, "Help, help," he assumes she's fitting a TV aerial and rudely asks if she can't survive a day without the telly. On the positive side, I thought the agoraphobia is put across pretty well through the camera work. It really feels disorientating. The house itself looks both beautiful and intimidating. It's well chosen. And there's some decent photography and a really good slow motion sequence near the end, which is pretty disturbing, if a bit long. The music's okay, but I particularly liked a scene where they used a fly buzzing to build tension. That was pretty good. I thought the lead actress gave a fairly good performance. I like the uncertainty of whether things are actually the work of ghosts or all in her head. So, onto the negative side, the dialogue. A couple of quotes I noted. When Daniel's asked if he believes in ghosts, he says, "Let me put it this way, it may come as a surprise to you that a physicist could even contemplate the existence of paranormal phenomena." The words natural flowing and dialogue don't exactly come to mind. And a couple of other examples, and apologies for the lack of Tom Elliott accent skills. I ain't saying I like your kind, I ain't saying I don't, but I got better things to do than type on your writer. And you see those here chickens, they knows who their mamas is, just like you know who your mama is, but I can't prove who their papas is. And loads more that kept me entertained throughout. Overall, it's creepy rather than scary. Maybe a bit longer than it needed to be, I don't know. It's filmed competently, though it did feel a bit like a 70s made-for-TV movie to me. It's certainly not terrible, and I know it sounds like I'm taking the mick out of this film, but overall, I have to admit I kind of enjoyed it. It's okay, as long as you don't put it up against something like The Changeling that came out the year before. The gore is all right, it's not that shocking. There's the odd boob or two, a couple of glimpses of thrusting bed sheets. I've got no idea why this would be controversial enough for a Section 3 list. One final thing that did amuse me is after all the horrific catastrophes and things that happen throughout the film, I love how they end by playing that "Happiness is a Cigar Called Hamlet" music over the closing credits. Anyway, keep up the great work, guys. Speak to you soon. Gore Blimey, over and out.
So there he is, Mr. Gore Blimey, the king of innuendo himself. Tom, he sounded a bit out of breath in that clip, didn't he? Do you think he was having a bit of a fiddle?
It's quite possible.
He was thinking about you, Tom, because, as we all know, you are the hunk of the show. And I'm a sort of kind of fat, plastic, like melted plastic, disgusting formation of horror from the bowels of hell. And you're not. You're the fucking... Oh, God. I can't stand you.
Well, if that's the case, Gore Blimey, then by all means, have this one on me. Well, not on me, but...
Are you asking him to fiddle himself on you, Tom?
No, please don't do that, Gore. But, anyway. So... His view of the nesting was similar to ours, just a lot less severe. I think there's a certain acknowledgement that it's not great and it sort of has some issues.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you, Tom. It's nice to hear from him, first of all, because he's been, writing into us, and I always speak to him on Twitter. It's hard to sort of disagree with anything he says, really. He's on holiday in Corfu at the moment, Tom, so he was sending that on his holiday, speaking into his iPhone. Very, very interesting sort of summation of things, and quite funny too, and basically I agree with everything he said. Okay, so thank you very much to everybody who sent in feedback. I know that feedback section was a bit long. We sort of like to keep our emails fairly short if we can, and audio files maybe no more than 3 or 4 minutes would be great. So that's it, guys. That is the end of the show. I think it was an interesting episode, Tom.
It was, yeah. Nice to discover a film like The Evil, I think, which is what doing this list was all about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like I say, I put it up near my selections of stuff I rather enjoyed while doing this show. I thought it was quite good. The Nesting Pants. Right, so that's it, guys. Before we go, we need to give you some information on how you can get in touch with us. Of course, if you want to email any feedback to us, you can do so. Just email feedback@strangeanddeadly.com. That's feedback@strangeanddeadly.com. We are, of course, on Twitter. It's the official Strange and Deadly Twitter account. It's twitter.com/strangedeadly. No and in there, of course. It's just Strange Deadly. Tom, where can they find you?
Grindhouse Tom.
Yeah, you can find me at The Gore Boy on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram at The Chris Clayton, where I post pictures of DVDs and Blu-rays and stuff that I get in the post. So if you want to subscribe to me there, follow me, you can see all of that. Of course, you can also listen to the Gore Boy Radio Golden Oldies, which Tom puts out every couple of weeks, which is my old shows if you want to catch up on old stuff I did many years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, I would say. Tom, what's going to be on the next episode of the Strange and Deadly Show? What's the theme?
Next time round is one of those shows when there's a couple of films on the list that aren't obscure in the slightest. Going to be very easy for people to find.
Finally.
Yeah, and they are a couple of we're calling these backwoods horror kind of things, and it's The Hills Have Eyes and The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's quite a double bill.
Yeah, we're finally covering films that you guys actually know and probably already have copies of. So yeah, The Hills Have Eyes, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's a backwoods horror theme, and it's coming to you on the next episode of The Strange and Deadly Show. So until then, take care of yourselves, love each other, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.
Bye.
The group gathers together inside the mansion, discussing their duties when Mary blah 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 blah.
Struggling a bit today, mate.
I am. Like even the bit I just did with drug rehabilitation program. I'll get there. No, she didn't. She lived at the end of it. I mean, it's funny you say that. It's I only watched it yesterday, and I can't remember a lot about it. I think it's pretty forgettable. Let me start that again. Hang on. Stuttering fool I am. No, she did die at the end. No, she didn't die at the end.
I know. I don't really know what to say.
Let's move. It's okay to accept the love of a man, Tom, if it's, you know. I don't know where I'm going with that.
I wasn't aware of that, but I am now. Okay, go on.
Take care of yourselves, love each other, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.
Bye.
Oh dear, this was a mess, this episode, wasn't it?